Good afternoon to you all, and thank you for joining us for today's Insights to Industry. Today we're joined by Nick Elston and Nicky Marshall, two leading experts in the field of mental health and wellbeing. Today's topic is building resilience in teams. We've all been through some challenging times over the last 12 months, given the order to work from home where possible due to COVID, members of teams being dispersed, adapting to online Teams meetings and Zooms, and not to mention some teams have been broken by furlough and in some case redundancies. I think it's fair to say that the impact COVID has had on teams throughout all organisations has been absolutely huge, not just in the workplace, but also ricocheting into our home lives as well. So the question for today is, how can we build resilience in teams? So just before we begin, and I do introductions, just a little bit of housekeeping, please do feel free to ask questions and utilise the chat. There'll be a Q&A session at the end. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to Nicky Marshall.
Thanks, Lou. Hi, everyone. My name is Nicky Marshall, and I'm one of the directors in a company called Discover Your Bounce. So we help you to bounce back from the things in life that maybe hold you back. And certainly in the last year, we've all needed to have tools and techniques to bounce. So as my slide says, I'm an international author and speaker, wellbeing facilitator. To date, we've worked with I think it's over 3,000 employees now in the wellbeing sphere, and just asked, how can we do this better, and how can we manage our people. I'm also a publisher. We have Discover Your Bounce Publishing, so publishing business and inspirational books. So I would like to now introduce Nick Elston.
Thank you very much, Nicky. And hey, everyone. Great to be back at Western College, albeit virtually. My name is Nick Elston. I'm an inspirational speaker on the lived experience of mental health. First question, yes, that's a job. It's been my job for 5 years, sharing my experiences of mental illness and mental health to audiences globally. And my way of doing things is to create unique mental health engagement strategies. So whereas Nicky is very much a solution, my sole purpose is on increasing engagement in the amazing initiatives and solutions that are out there already. And I'm going to kick straight off. Let's go into it. So I want to kind of take the next 15 minutes to cover just 3 points that I'm really seeing with audiences and clients at the moment. Kind of my lived experience take on this. And I think the first thing to kind of really drill down to is the definition of mental health. I think for me, mental health has been hijacked as a term. Mental health is just a neutral state. I think it's really important to recognize that people will say to me, Nick, I have mental health. Absolutely you do. 100% of the planet has mental health. If you have poor mental health or good mental health, that's a whole different thing. So for the sake of what I'm going to go into, think of mental health as a muscle, something we can exercise. And mental illness absolutely needs to be professionally treated. So if we can exercise mental health, if we can build resilience in ourselves and our teams, here are some of the things I think we should dip into right away. How can we look after our people? Actually, the most important part of that is how can we look after our people? I love the power of negative questioning. If you've got a team of 10 people, you've got 11 people's burdens on your shoulder before you even go home. That's a reality of the situation. But even if you're not in a position of leadership or management, you have family, you have friends, you have colleagues, you have partners. Who looks after the people that looks after people? To use that overused airplane adage, we need to put our oxygen mask on first to be able to help other people. But here in the UK, we have a massive problem with that. We've been conditioned generationally and culturally to believe that self-care is selfish. So that's why we feel guilty when we put ourselves before anything or anyone. And I'm sure you'll recognize that. It's a real human flaw wrapped in a kindness that we feel the need to fix anybody that comes to us with a problem. So let's walk you through an alternate version of that example that you're probably facing every day. If somebody comes to you, if one of your team comes to you and shares with you their mental health challenges, but bear in mind if they share that and something is sensitive, it could be about sexuality or race or gender or abuse or loss, all these things that we experience we just don't talk about, then first and foremost, that's a massive well done to you. You have the trust and rapport with them strong enough to be able to have that conversation. That's a massive plus. However, your responsibility is not to fix them. Unless you're a medical professional, unless you are a practitioner, our responsibility is not to fix them. And as somebody who has hundreds of these conversations every single week, it's about setting that agenda about how you genuinely can help them. So if we can't fix them, what can we do? Well, first and foremost, genuinely listen to them. Essentially in life, people just want to be heard and they want to be understood. And actually 90% of the time in my experience, that's enough for them to find their own way forward. So somebody comes to you, put the device down, put the phone away, and just listen to them. And there's a few reasons for that. Firstly, there is a huge responsibility at play. It could be the only time in their lives they decide to open up to anybody. That's huge. The second thing is that the problem that they come to you about may not be the problem. It may be the byproduct, it may be the symptom. So when I experienced high anxiety during my kind of time, then it would manifest as high sensitivity or aggression or defensive behavior or lethargy, a lack of energy. So very often we need to keep asking twice to make sure we get to the root of that problem. And then when we have genuinely established what's causing that person discomfort or disease, then we can then start to look at what we can do and how we can influence. So 90% of the time, you can empower people to find their own way forward, and therefore you encourage more conversations without taking that burden on your own shoulders and causing you the sleepless nights. But also it's important to recognize that 10% that maybe do want a little bit more, that's where I focus. That's where the active signposting. Get really good at knowing the solutions that are available within your organization. And not just that, make it a passion. Make it external. Get good at knowing the solutions available anywhere. Get good at knowing trusted partners like Nicky. Get good at knowing those people so that actually when you have those conversations and people come to you about their stuff, that you can actually empower them the best way that you can in that position without feeling that burden of fixing them. And because I have made it a passion, I've forged relationships with the Black and ethnic minority groups, LGBTQ groups, lots of different organizations and communities that I'm not part of, but I know that that will be something that somebody talks to me about at one stage. So I've given myself every tool in the toolbox to be able to help them the best way that I can. I focus a lot on engagement. I work with people like KFC, for example. So KFC have a workforce. It's not just office. It's not just retail. It's not just factory. It's everything. So the best way that I can reach their people is I host a TV show for them. So when you're looking to engage with people, really think outside the box and engage with them on their terms. This is not about you. And I think that's a really important place to start. This is never about us. It's about reaching people on their terms. The second element I want to talk about is your high performing day. Now, some of you may know, because I recognize some names in the attendee box, that in 2012, I've shared very openly my experiences of breakdown, which has come from sustained burnout through my experiences of mental illness and mental health. But when I look back, what were the two reasons why I got to that point? And actually, I've since learned through clients and audiences, the two reasons why most people get to that point in their lives. Actually, the first one is masking behavior. I would try and be what situations demanded of me. I would try and be what people wanted to see in me, but I sure wouldn't damn show myself, because when I showed myself, my narrative told me that I would get shot at or dismissed or judged or not loved. I acted from a position of fear constantly, but actually driven by high anxiety, you could be very successful, but you can only run for so long until you stop, and that's the problem. So that's certainly the reason why a lot of us get to that point. So I was always physically present somewhere, but never truly present anywhere. That I was a different person at home than I was with my friends, a different person with my friends than I was in the workplace, and the list goes on. And it's really important to recognize that we do that. We will mirror people, what people want to see in us, to give ourselves away. We give ourselves away to appease other people and situations. And the second reason why I got to that point, why people get to that point generally, is the amazing things that Nicky will be sharing when she does her little bit in a second. It's about what I call recovery, actually making sure that you have daily amounts of recovery in your diary, schedule your actual recovery time so that you can rest and recharge and recover and go again strong tomorrow. And actually the second reason why I got to my point in time was because of a lack of recovery. I would just constantly go and go. I was in earlier than I had to be, away later than I needed to be, never truly present everywhere. And I since learned that anxiety for me lived in the past or lived in the future. It was very rarely in the day, but I'll come on to that. So I built this tool called High Performing Day, something that I use and talk audiences through, which I'm never going to pretend to be a guru on things like meditation or mindfulness and nutrition. I'll let Nicky do that stuff. She knows what she's doing on that stuff. However, I am very passionate about laying the foundation stones to manage our mental and emotional well-being. Actually, for me, it's very simple. You set your boundaries and you manage your expectations, whether it's yourself personally, at home or whether it's in the workplace professionally, set your boundaries and manage those expectations. Some of the things to focus on, there's an amazing commencement speech by an American naval commander on the importance of making your bed. If you get up in the morning and make your bed, not only have you achieved something straight away, but whatever rubbish happens to you that day, you've got a nice, neat bed to go back to. I love that. And it's a great example of what sports coaches call marginal gains, daily, consistent, incremental changes that add up to a bigger picture result. The Japanese call it Kaizen as a term for use in work and also in home life. But some of the things to set those boundaries around your time. So actually, we all know the boundaries have kind of got a lot blurred. We're all experiencing that kind of Groundhog Day. So we can really turn that on its head. It can be our superpower if we use it the right way. So set your time limits on your work and try to incorporate little buffer zones between calls. At the moment, will have one meeting finish and immediately another screen will pop back up again. In real life, we would have to drive somewhere, walk somewhere. There'd be a gap in between. So try and shake things up, use that kind of hydration and movement and exercise, have that well-being time actually in your high-performing day. Very simple example is this. If your email response time was 4 hours pre-pandemic, and now it's 8 hours, unless you communicate that change to your audience, your clients, your people, then the expectation from their perspective does not change. And therefore, the anxiety still builds up on you. If you're going to set your boundaries, if you're going to start to create that high-performing day, unless you communicate those changes to other people, to your clients, to your teams, then nothing absolutely changes. So it still creates that feeling of kind of stress and overwhelm. So communicate any boundaries that you create, because we are all waiting for permission. And what I found is very much is what I do and what I deliver from a lived experience perspective. If I'm not a solution, what does it give people? Actually, it gives people permission. So people will actually hear somebody talking about something which is sensitive, and then they'll kind of want to stand up. And your high performing day is exactly the same. Because if you're not truly living a life on your terms, and by default, you're living a life on somebody else's terms. And that's enough to scare me every single day to make sure that I do my absolute best personally and professionally. As a speaking coach, I focus on something called emotional storytelling, using your stories to be able to create something better. The reason my strapline is forging people is because it came from this, that in life we can either let our adversities define us negatively for the rest of our days, or we can choose for it to forge something better. And coming on to that seamlessly-ish, reclaiming your choice is exactly where you're at. Look, if you're struggling with mental health challenges, if you know somebody who is, if you are struggling even with things like low self-esteem, low self-confidence, then the first thing you sacrifice is the only thing that you have. The first thing you sacrifice is choice. We start to allow ourselves to go at the ebb and flow of life. We cannot control the uncontrollable. We cannot control pandemics. We cannot control other people, what they say, what they do. The only things that we have any amount of control over at all are our thoughts and our actions and how we choose to go into each and every day. And if we're giving that away, we are going at the ebb and flow of life. This is about looking at your thoughts and your actions and actually proactively putting them into that high performing day structure to create that bigger picture result, using those daily consistent incremental changes. It starts with choice. As I said before, anxiety to me was regret from the past or fear of the future, and it wasn't today. However, thinking a little bit further ahead than that, if you think about something now which is causing you the most anxiety, which is causing you the most stress, ask yourself this crucial, albeit mind-bending question: is it fact or is it story? And I'll use a very basic example. I love basic examples because I'm not a details guy. I do a lot of work with schools as well, and also corporates and prisons. And by the way, prisons are a lot easier than schools. There we go. Tip. So with the school stuff, a couple of weeks ago has happened that a girl said that what makes her anxious is when she texts her friend and her friend doesn't text her back. Actually, that's not what makes her anxious. What makes her anxious is the story she's telling herself, that she's been dismissed or judged or not loved, they've fallen out. All these kind of things that go on until we have that outcome. And actually, by the end of the session, she had heard back. So that's a really small example, but you can apply that to anything that you're struggling with professionally and personally right now. Think about this. If it's something that's a fact, if it's not a story telling yourself, then we can deal with fact. We can sort fact. But if it's a story, how can we start to influence our story? Because we are hardwired to look for fear. We're hardwired to look for danger. It's a very primal thing. So by default, we'll talk ourselves into a losing game. We don't want that. We want to be talking ourselves into a winning game. I spoke at Excel London, going back around 3-4 years ago now, to thousands of people. It was one of the first stage events I actually did. And it really signified a crucial kind of time in my life for me, because that event happened 5 years after I was at the same event, walking around trying to nick the goodie bags off the stands when the sales guys weren't looking. Don't judge, we've all been there. And it was back at a time where I was really struggling, and actually had a panic attack, an anxiety attack at that event. And I was taken out by St. John's ambulance and taken back to the hotel. And it's crazy that actually within 5 years, almost to the day, I was booked a keynote there in my own right. And this sounds really glib, but it's absolutely true. The biggest change in those 2 points in time that are worlds apart, the biggest change was how I used my self-narrative, how I spoke to myself. I started to talk myself into a winning game. Be quite honest with you, you can probably get that by now, I'm a very honest guy, that I had struggled a lot with social anxiety, that I'm not thin enough, I'm not good looking enough, and all this kind of, despite the mask I was putting on, I was really struggling behind that. So that really kind of tapped into that. So if we can change the way that we talk to ourselves, we can change everything. Neurologically, it takes between 21 and 28 days to start to form a new habit strong enough to replace your old conditioning. So that's what I did. I went from going to that event and really, really struggling, so I could never do that, looking at side speakers or the stage speaker, definitely never do that. And I started to say, I could do that. And that I could do that turned to I can do that. And then that turned to it's tomorrow. And that was really, that really put the fear of God on me. So that all changed by using our narrative. So check in with how you talk to yourself, check in with on how you talk to other people. Are you really encouraging them and challenging them in a positive way? You're inspiring them to create positive change? Or actually, are you reaffirming the danger, reaffirming the fear? Because a lot of the time, this fear that we experience is exactly that. It's false evidence appearing real. But we make our life choices on that. And I guess wrapping up on my little section, the quote I love to use is every storm runs out of rain. I'm a big country music fan. If you're into country music, it's by Gary Allan, but every storm runs out of rain. I think we need to know that right now. Every storm you've ever been through is at least passed. You've at least survived because you're here. Most of the time we thrive. Most of the time we evolve. Despite the brutal and harsh storms that we experience, that we can actually do a lot of good with this. Something positive will come from this. We just need to use that in the right way, reclaim your choice. And if it's somebody coming to you, just give them that little bit of hope. Give them your attention, listen to them, because actually they're not coming to you to be fixed. They're coming to you to be heard. And that's it. And we can all do that for people right now. And if you can do all those things, then actually our resilience actually increases as a byproduct. And so that's me. Thank you so much for listening to my little section on that. I'm really delighted to hand over to my good friend, Nicky, and we're going to bounce around some chat and stuff afterwards too, which is really cool. So thank you very much.
Brilliant. Thanks, Nick. And I think, some of your honest sharings will be striking a chord with a lot of people, because in this last year, we have had jolly good calls for anxiety. And I loved what you said about mental health being a scale, because some days our mental health can be really high and other days not so high. And I would love to share tips and techniques that can help people to bounce back and to use practical techniques rather than just feeling uncomfortable, actually to do something about it. So I'm going to be sharing kind of 4 main points in this presentation today, mainly around well-being, giving some well-being tips, and looking at what does good look like for you. Because right now we have been through an interesting year, and I don't know what version of new normal we're in right now. I lost track at sort of version 6. But we have been through so many changes that as employees, employees are at home, then they're back at work, then they're back at home. There's been lots and lots of change over the last year. And I would suggest that the coming year, we're probably due for quite a few more changes as the world kind of opens up. And I'm all about the bounce back. I'm all about helping people to bounce back in life. And so wouldn't it be great if we had some practical things we could do to help ourselves to actually bounce back? So the CIPD did a great absence management survey back a few years ago, and they actually said in a team of 10 people, if a team of 10 people are all stressed, then 8 out of 10 of them can't concentrate. So think about that. If you run a team of 10 people, 8 of them can't concentrate. 6 of them take longer to do the tasks that they normally do really quickly, but because they're stressed, they can't concentrate, so they take longer. 5 out of that team will be unhelpful to your customers and other team members, and 3 of them will actually pick a fight and fall out with their team. So, obviously, if you do the maths, there are some people that are doing more than one of those things. But you think about that, and the 3 that have picked a fight is not because they're generally argumentative, it's because under stress we react in a different way, and we become a different person than the normal person. And so, as Nick said, if someone comes to you with some kind of behavior, it's really good to say, are you okay? And how can I help? And just sit there and actually listen to that person, because at worst, they're actually okay and they think, there's nothing going on. And at worst, they think you're a really nice person for checking in with them. And at best, you can actually save their life. And I don't take that term lightly. I know that one of our mental health awareness trainings, I know we saved a life that day. So you can have a big, big impact on people. So how do you stay well? How do you look after you? So the first thing I would suggest is actually check in with yourself daily. Actually take some time in the morning before you start work, before you start your day, and think, how am I? How is your mental health? It could be that you haven't had a good night's sleep the night before, for example. Maybe you're feeling a bit tired. If we have a bad night's sleep, our mood drops by 30%. So maybe you're feeling a bit grumpy. Or it could be you're having your best day ever. It could be that life's great. But just ask yourself that question. See where your mental health is at. And how about physical health? Do you have boundless amounts of energy that morning, or are you struggling? Are you overwhelmed slightly by the day you've got ahead of you? Are you worried that you won't be able to fit everything in? And then we use the term spirit. So we talk about mind, body, spirit, vision. Spirit is happiness, but also community and creativity. So the one thing that I think has taken a real bashing is creativity in business, because we've gone all hands on deck. When we're in fight or flight, we actually lose our ability to think clearly, because in fight or flight, we go back to what they call the crocodile brain or the dinosaur brain. So our frontal cortex just stops engaging. We lose 60% of our brain's ability to function when we're in fight or flight. And so the first thing that disappears is our creativity. If you have a dinosaur coming towards you, you don't think, oh, that's a lovely shade of green. You want to fight or run. So creativity has taken a real bashing. So when we are checking in daily, what are you doing that makes you feel good? Are you, reading? Are you listening to lovely music? Have you got favourite music tracks? One of the things we talk about when we go into businesses is to actually create your own happy kit. So have a list of 10 things that you love to do. Anything from music to your favourite food to wearing brand new socks. That tends to be I'm known for new socks. That's one of my favourites. But really simple things that can just lift your mood and just give your brain the message that today is a good day. And then on the vision front, looking at what does good look like and how can I create a really good day? So diving into that, the one thing I would suggest is that you plan in your well-being first before you plan your work, and preferably about a week before you plan your work. But if not, then Sunday, take some time with your diary and look and think, when am I gonna exercise? Even if that's just going for a walk around the block, taking some time out in daylight, in fresh air. When am I going to exercise? What am I going to eat? Because if we're really hungry or hangry, then we tend to pick the kind of not so good snacks for us. Whereas actually, if you know that your fridge is full of a lot of options, it's all about balance. You can think about having the right food in place so that if you are really hungry, that you can grab something that's really good for you. And definitely, I know we're coming out of winter, which is brilliant. But eating the rainbow, eating fruit and veg that are rainbow coloured, gives us every vitamin, mineral and trace mineral that we need to support our own health and our energy levels. Also think about socializing, catching up with friends and family, because we're very good at, human beings, of beating ourselves up and saying, getting to Friday and saying, I haven't called my mum, I didn't check in with my friend, I haven't been anywhere that's fun, or, even if it's a takeaway coffee, I haven't done anything that's good for me. So really think about that social element. It could be a Zoom call or a messenger call, or it could actually be a walk with a friend, but actually plan in some socializing. And also think about that long-term vision. Are you working towards a longer-term goal? Is there any learning that you need to do? Are there any plans that you need to put in place? Because when we are in fight or flight, we think about right now, our focus goes from a really wide focus into what do I have to do right now? And so we don't actually look longer term. This lockdown is ending. At some point, we will be able to start having dreams and goals and vision and looking further ahead than the next news bulletin. And so think about your vision. What are you doing today that's tuning into that vision of the future? So when I'm talking about vision, and creating your vision, what does good look like for you? Because well-being and life, there is no one on the planet, unless you are a twin, obviously, caveat, there is no one on the planet that is exactly like you. There's no one that looks like you. There's no one that thinks like you. There's no one that acts like you. And when we talk about well-being, we say to people, well, what do you do when you're stressed? A lot of people will say, well, I can't sleep. Some people say, I need about 10 hours sleep. When we say about food, some people say, oh, I just can't eat when I'm stressed. Other people say, I just eat all the time when I'm stressed. And so we're all these unique human beings. And so you have to create good for you. And also, what do you want to be known for? That's a really interesting question, isn't it? What do you want to be known for? When people are remembering you, what do you want to be known for? Since the first lockdown, the first lockdown, I was going live in our community. We have Discover Your Bounce community on Facebook. I was going live in that community every single day, Saturdays and Sundays, talking about positivity, sharing wellbeing tips, dressing up in Tigger suits, making people laugh. And actually, that's the thing that people have remembered, is that during lockdown, we kept people going. We shared jokes and inspirational tips, and we wrote meditations and blogs and all sorts of things just to help people with their mental health and to keep them positive. And what do you want to be known for? In your team, do you want to be known as one of the 3 out of 10 that lose their cool when they're stressed? Or do you want to be known as the cheerleader, the person that brings in a bunch of daffs or some fruit for the office, or some cakes? I'm all for cakes. I'm not all about positive, good nutrition. Think about, what do you want to be known for, and plan that into your vision. And when I talk about vision, think of this or better. So you might wish for something, and there could be a better option out there, but be open to just starting somewhere and thinking, well, that's what I'm going to wish for. So I started speaking and networking to really small groups, and the paper would shake where I was so nervous. But I just loved sharing inspiration with people. And actually, since those small beginnings, I've spoken to the Novartis Institute of Biomedical Research in Boston. I've spoken to the leadership team at Great Ormond Street. I couldn't have started with that vision. It was way too big. So I had to start with, I want to speak in front of a networking group. So you start with what you find is capable, what you're capable of and what's manageable now. And then you start stretching that vision. But what you don't do is go straight into the panic zone. You don't change everything all at once. Because again, remembering fight or flight in the brain, if too much happens too quickly, you'll go into fight or flight, you'll lose your creativity, you'll start doubting yourself, imposter syndrome, that negative voice will start to tell you all the reasons why you're rubbish. Whereas if you just stretch and every day or every week do one thing that's towards your goal, then gradually you'll get to that place, but over a sort of manageable longer period of time. Also, if you have a vision, gratitude is a massive part of creating your vision. So if you have a big vision and one tiny thing happens, then really celebrate that, because not only will you get a hit of the feel-good hormones, so serotonin and dopamine in the brain, you'll also know that you're on your path, you'll know that you're on your plan. And if you want to break down that vision, then actually think about your goals. So a great way of doing that is to, think of a goal and think, right, I want to do this. So maybe it's that you want to have some kind of promotion or start your own business or grow your business. And using the GROW model, so you start off with the G, so that's what is your goal. So you define your goal in as much detail as you possibly can. Think of it from an emotional point of view, because when you get your limbic brain involved, that's when all the creativity starts coming in. So define your goal in really clear terms of what you want. Then look at your reality. And again, don't beat yourself up, but look at where you are. And if where you are today is not where you want to be, then that's okay. Just mark that place, because in 6 months, a year's time, you might look back and think, gosh, it was unreal, and actually now I'm already doing it. So mark your reality. Where are you right now? And look at the difference between that goal and your reality. And then look at options. The O is for options. What could you do to get yourself towards that goal? You're not necessarily going to do these things, but what could you do? Because again, that gets your creativity flowing. It gets new neural pathways sparking in your brain, and you start looking at all the things that are possible, all the things that you could do to get yourselves to that goal. And some of them might not in practice work at all. Doesn't matter. The idea is you're just expanding your creativity, and you're having fun around that idea. And then the W is what will you do? So out of that list of options, you pick one thing and you say, right, I will do this. So you pick an option and you try it. If it doesn't work, you don't beat yourself up. You have this sort of growth mindset that says, I either win or I learn. So if it didn't work, then you've already got a list of options that you can go back to and say, right, what's the next one I'm going to do? So use the GROW model to actually look at your goals. And the final thing is have fun on your to-do list. We go into organizations and we say, and a lot of the time we work with accountants and solicitors, a lot of professional people go, who has a to-do list? And all the hands go up really, really excited. And I say, who puts fun on their to-do list? And there's just silence, because we don't tend to do that. But actually put fun on your to-do list. Make sure that fun happens, because when we have fun, we laugh, we smile, we produce, as I say, all these feel-good hormones. We get ourselves into that good mental health state. We engage our frontal cortex, so we can have inspiration and critically think about all the things that we want to do. And it takes you away from the stresses of the day. I remember, so my background is management accountancy, and I used to control the budgets for a 3 million turnover company. And it was spreadsheets. It was a long time ago. But if there was a difference on that spreadsheet, or if I couldn't find the difference, I would study and study and study and get more and more angry and stressed at the fact that I couldn't find this difference. Like I say, when you're stressed, your vision goes to that. So I would get up, walk off in a huff, or maybe leave it and come back to it the next day. And I can guarantee the next time I open that spreadsheet, because I'd gone off and done something else and got my vision back, within 5 minutes, I would always find that mistake. Because sometimes we focus on what's wrong rather than what's right when we're stressed. And actually, if you can think of your mental health, your physical health, your spiritual health, and your vision for the future, then I guarantee your vistas will open up and you will spot a lot more opportunities. Even from the simple fact that we have, it's called the reticular activating system in our brain, which looks for what we tell it. So if you tell yourself it's going to rain today, if there's one spot of rain, it's going to find you and you'll go, see, I told you. But if you tell your brain that you're going to have an amazing day, you're going to meet really friendly, happy people, you're going to have a really productive day at work, and you're going to feel really good, then that's what your brain will look for. And so I would just say that, bounce back ability is the ability to put all these things into place. And that means that we can go out, we can take risks, we can maybe stretch and do the things that we want to do. But then we do have that time to reboot and recover, because we know what makes ourselves tick. So, work out what combination of that works best for you. For me, I know it's always sleep. If I get good sleep, the world is okay. If I don't get good sleep, everyone knows about it. And so think about that one thing that you need to give you the energy and the good mental health to get on in life and do the things that are important to you. So there are my tips just to reflect. So check in daily, plan your well-being in before your work, create that vision of what good looks like, and add fun to that list. So that's it from me. I think we're going to go into some questions. So I'm going to hand back to Louise.
Thanks so much. That was awesome. So we do have a few questions in the chat. So the first one is, what are the best ways to plan and implement wellbeing time in a high performing day? Because I'm exactly how you described, Nick. I am sometimes back to back with meetings with no breathe space, and sometimes even if I sort of put some time in the diary, things naturally overrun, and then I end up with nothing. So how can I build it better, for want of a bit of a way?
I think we think too big in terms of breaks. So I'll give you an example, kind of how I structured mine, and hopefully that, and everyone's workloads are different, everyone's responsibilities are different, so I understand that. But how I did with mine, for every phone call, I put in a 10-minute buffer zone, either way. For every meeting or engagement, I put in a longer one, obviously, to help me recharge and stuff. So everyone, they look different, but I think don't think too big within putting those little breaks. So a break could be actually you set an alarm every hour to walk downstairs and get a glass of water and walk back up again. That's enough to give you that little boost. I'm also fully aware that not everyone's having the same experience. So I'm very fortunate. I live next to a lot of kind of common land, so I can go out walking and stuff. Now, people that are in high rises may not have that opportunity. So even simple things like moving your environment around, just shifting the furniture around a bit, opening the window. So I think when we're thinking about that question, think the minute changes you can make. And I know I mentioned it briefly in the section I did, but reading anything on Kaizen is a really important stepping stone, really kind of tweaking those daily incremental consistent changes.
Awesome, thank you.
And I would say top and tail your day, because I know people have talked about in the chat. I can see, to shut off from the pressures of checking out emails out of hours. So I would say make sure you've done something good for you in the morning before you start work, even if it does mean setting the alarm a little bit earlier to get outside for a walk or something like that, and have a boundary. And it could be that you do have an alarm going off on your phone. If you finish at 5 o'clock, you finish at 5 o'clock. And we have become this always on society where emails and Facebook messages and LinkedIn messages and everything comes in at us 24/7. But you can put a do not disturb on your phone. So I in lockdown, I got into answering emails at maybe 9 o'clock at night, things like that. So I've now gone back to, I answer emails between 9 and 5, and I have a do not disturb that goes on my phone at 9. And I'm really trying to draw back from that. And in a meeting, if you have an hour's meeting and you think it's going to overrun, at the beginning of the meeting, say to someone, I have to be away by, say, 1:05 if it ends at 1. So you're still giving a bit of extra value, but then you have got time to, as Nick said, have a walk, make a drink, do something before you start again.
Take a breath. Yeah.
I think it also absolutely agree with Nicky 100%, but I think it does come back down to what I was saying about communicating your expectations. Sometimes actually, if we are struggling, even with our confidence and our courage and our conviction, that we don't feel that we can have a say in it. So if you have a meeting coming up, set that boundary. Actually, I've got an hour. This is what you have. So actually, you're giving them that kind of upfront deal. This is what it's going to look like for me. And then people will very often work around you. If you're the one with the boundary, they will often work around you. But again, the boundary is kind of like the easier part, because in our heads, we know kind of how we want to live, how we want to work. But then the reality comes from communicating those boundaries to your clients, your teams, your friends, your family, whatever that may be.
I think self-discipline is quite a big piece of this, from the things that you've been describing. So like making sure you have that, you're setting that expectation and making sure that you're allowing yourself that time in the morning or in the evening or in between meetings. I think self-discipline is probably a massive factor there, which something maybe I need to work on myself.
The more stressed you get, the more your brain won't function in that way. So it's like a chicken and egg almost. So if it doesn't happen and it doesn't work, then just affirm to start again on Monday. Set those boundaries in.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think it's also accepting that look, even though we talk about this, and I know I'm not going to be wrong speaking for Nicky as well, we get our days where we just feel kind of this is not hallelujah, he's cured. I manage my stuff daily, and actually some days is harder than others. I think it's about kind of, this is all part of building that playbook of having things on hand to be able to manage your state effectively. So I use music a lot. Music's very powerful for me. It will lift my state. So I listen to music before I come on. I listen to more music when I come off, and it's got 2 different tempos. So lots of different things you can do and have these tools in place. But as Nicky said, it's about kind of planning ahead and having it in place. So actually it takes a barrier away when you're not feeling it, when you haven't got the energy to get up and go running and that kind of stuff.
Yeah. And a question in the chat about setting routines and then not lasting. There are some really great apps. There's an app called Productive, and there's another one called Dailyo, where you can actually tick off when you've done your things. So I would start with 1. If you start with too many and make it too intricate, then you overwhelm yourself and you're back to the square one. But if you are going to say, make your bed and get out for a 5-minute walk and drink 1 extra glass of water, you can put it in these apps, and then you can actually track your performance. And if you're slightly competitive, then they work really well.
I think that aligns with Mike's question as well. Mike put about diet, that there's weeks where I just go completely off course, and that could be for different reasons, to be honest. I'm not kind of stood in front of you, like I said, as somebody just does everything right. But I know that I hadn't gone running for a long time until even, I think it was 2 days ago. And I took away every barrier by doing, like I said, at Nicky's kind of preparation. Everything was laid out on the floor, the bottle, the shorts and trainers and that kind of stuff. So actually all I had to do was to get out of the house as soon as I woke up. I was actually kind of out of the house before I woke up, I think. But in answer to Mike's question, that combined with a better focus on nutrition this week, within 2 or 3 days, I feel brilliant already. The energy comes back. So I think those questions link really nicely together. So sorry for skipping ahead a bit.
Awesome, thank you. We've got a really good question from Amber. So what do you do when you check in on someone and they say they're okay, and as their manager or a member of their team, you know they're not okay? So how does somebody support an individual knowing that person isn't okay?
Shall I?
Yeah, of course.
Cool. So I think for me, there's a couple of things. Again, it ties in with another question about kind of sometimes they want solutions. I think that was asked in the chat box as well. I'll be honest, I've turned the chat box off because I get really easily distracted, like magpie syndrome. So I'm reliant on you two. So,
no worries, I'm on it.
Cool, that's good. So again, disarming truth, I'll be honest with you. So I think it does align with that as well. I think sometimes people do want more from you, but it's about setting that clear expectation of what you're about. So something along the lines of, I would love to help you. I want to listen to you, but I won't be able to be the fix, the solution, whatever you want to word that. So it's kind of like you empower people by getting that active signposting thing in. And I think then, sorry, the original question was, because I linked that to, and I forgot about the first one.
It's about when you check in on somebody and you ask them if they're okay and they say no, but you clearly know that they're okay, they're not okay.
Yeah, so that's, I'll be honest, that's a tough one. And actually there's a lot of variables in that. It depends on the dynamic of your relationship. When I work with clients, I do this kind of mentoring thing where they have an online check-in tool sent to them every Monday morning. And that online check-in tool covers 10 areas of life and business, which they score out of 10. It gives me an overall score where anybody is at one point in time, but also means if anything dips below 6, I know that's something I can focus on by providing content or workshops and that kind of stuff around that. So doing it that way is a lot safer and less confrontational than having that conversation, what's wrong with you, or that kind of stuff, because people would very often clam up. We're also pre-programmed to say, great, straight away. How are you? I'm great, thanks. How are you? So actually the second question is always the more powerful. But to take away the awkwardness of that conversation, because it's not easy. Unless somebody is like leading a horse to water, I guess, that unless somebody is committed to do something, it's really difficult. So for me, it's about taking those barriers away. So if they find it difficult to speak to you in person, I'll very happily share this online tool that I use, that I created, that will give you a way of getting that feedback from them without having that kind of voice-to-voice conversation. So that's the first thing. I think also it's the same with counselling and therapy. Again, very open about this. Every Friday at 2:00, which is why you'll never book me on a Friday afternoon, I have therapy, I have a counselling session. And I think it's really important to be open about that, because it's quite a taboo thing. And when I first restarted this at the turn of the year, actually, I felt the same things that everybody else does, vulnerability, and I felt trust kind of issues and that kind of stuff. So when I'm engaging in that again, you need to take every barrier away. So if you're going to try to signpost them into a solution, try and think of the safest way possible to do that. So, for example, talking to a therapist is a really powerful thing. However, it's a very daunting thing. But knowing that they offer discovery calls, and actually that the most important fit is the cultural one, all you're trying to do is then signpost them to have one call with one person to see how they got on. So again, you're taking away the bigger picture fear. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, and I think to add to that, if you say to someone, how are you really, and they still say they're fine, then maybe it could be about building trust. Like if you can see in their workplace that they're upset, maybe they're in tears, or maybe they're just looking really sad, even things like taking in a bunch of flowers or making them a cup of tea can kind of build the trust that you are that nice person. The other thing another really good question is, what do you need? Because for someone, if they're mental health struggling, they might not need that therapy. They might need help with their workload. They might need help structuring their day. And it's so individual that, what do you need is just a really good question. And if after all that, then, you are still worried, you can, take them out. Taking someone out for a walk is really good because you're not face to face with them. They don't feel as intimidated. But it is okay to say, I am really concerned, and as your manager or team member, I would like you to have a chat. Who would you like to chat to? Would you like to chat to HR? Would you like me to, ring a family member? Would you like me to come to your GP with you? You can actually be really honest and open and say, I need to know that, I need to know that you're okay, and whatever you need. It is better to escalate something if you're really not happy with that situation.
Brilliant, thank you. We've had a few other questions. So Abby's saying, some of my staff do want answers or resolutions, and listening is not enough at times, saying expectations can be difficult. So yeah, I agree. Have you got any kind of thoughts on that?
Only in terms of what I said about just now, about the kind of setting that expectation up front, that actually that's not, regardless of what they want, that's not what you can provide. So you have a limited amount of solutions available within the organization that you work for. You will have lots of resources outside of that, which you can certainly help people by empowering them to have that conversation, removing the barriers that they could have around that. But absolutely, not being afraid of setting that expectation up front that I as much as I want to help you, it's not something that I can do in terms of a professional sense. But I will be there for every step of the way if you need support, or every step of the way if you need me in your corner. I can absolutely do that, but I'm not going to be the person that's going to be able to fix you. Can I help you find someone who will?
It's honesty, isn't it?
Yeah. And I think, from an organisational point of view, you can do so much. You can make sure that there is signposting. You can run activities. A lot of companies we work with, we go in quarterly and make sure that there's always something going on so that wellbeing is front of mind. But the employee or the person has to take that responsibility as well. They have to turn up to things. They have to, we all have an individual duty to look after ourselves to be safe at work. And so, as Nick said, you can signpost, you can do so much, but we can't fix everything for everyone. And so yeah, it can be tough, but we need to know when, where that line is.
Yeah. Excellent. So Dan's asking, do you have any advice on setting a new positive routine? I want to do it, and it lasts maybe 3 days before things get stressful and I return to the old way. How do we stop? How do we break that sort of the break in our new cycle, so to say? Because I've experienced it myself as well, Dan. I started trying to lose weight at the beginning of the year, and 2 months in, it was amazing. And then one day I stopped tracking, and that's it. I just can't seem to get back on now. So yeah, so I would love some advice with that as well, please.
Yeah, I think the apps that I mentioned are really good, like Dailyo and Productive. But also I think setting that vision of, what good looks like, because how will you know when you've got there? And maybe setting reminders on your phone, making sure you have kind of, thought about when you're going to start it. And personally, I've had routines that have gone to the wall and not happened. And I usually give myself the Monday, the Monday sort of Monday week and kind of say, right, I'm going to start again. So I give myself some time to not and then start again. But yeah, it's right. It does have to become a habit, and we need to make sure that the time is there, because if work takes over so much of your time and we are stressed, then work is the thing that is gonna take your brain space. So sometimes it's not about the thing, it's about having the headspace to do the thing.
Yeah, I think certainly that marginal gains approach works. It's the reason why things like Couch to 5K are so popular and so effective, because it takes you on that journey bit by bit. You won't get this unless you see me in person. I'm 6'4", 20 odd stone guy. I ain't small. So the weight thing, I absolutely get. I think thinking kind of like devil's advocate on this, I think a big kind of question to ask ourselves, because I think we do have all the answers, we just don't ask ourselves the right questions. That why is it that you have that, in my case, positive association with being big? And that's why it's so difficult for me to come away from that point. And when I think about that, it's because as much as I love them and miss them every single day of my life, my grandparents would say, he's a big lad, he loves his food. I'm a big lad, I love my food. So it's really hard for me to come away from that point, because actually I've been conditioned to, like a comfort blanket, I guess. It's a really positive association with being big. So actually it doesn't feature high on, even though I know it's unhealthy, it doesn't feature high on my agenda because of that. So that's the bit I'm working on, is the actual why. And I think that, like everything I've experienced with my breakdown and everything else, actually the why is the starting point of everything, because then I can work back about how we fix it. I think we have this mindset, really, we always try to fix the symptom, not the problem.
Yeah.
Excellent, thanks. So I think we may have already covered this, but what advice could you give someone who can sometimes get a little overwhelmed with tasks throughout the day, even with a to-do list?
I would again question the stress levels, because at a certain point our brain ceases to function, and we don't have about 8 out of 10 people that can't concentrate. You know, if there is too much going on, I would want to check around that person. You know, have they had any annual leave, for example? Are they getting good sleep? Are they drinking water? You know, are there things that they, you know, are they in that stressed state? And maybe there is a kind of reset around that, because that's usually when overwhelm comes in. What do you think, Nick?
Yeah, I think so. I think with I know I sound like kind of a broken record. I think when you start to take it down those little changes, it takes away that feeling of overwhelm. That we don't feel that we're trying to, that boom and bust mentality can really play a big picture. I think we also need to recognize, let's be honest, that when we look at things like personal development or diets or anything that we're trying to improve, for anyone who's been down that journey before, that you'll know that most books you read kind of make you think that if you don't do everything this way, you're a rubbish human being, because everyone wants you to do it their way. So again, it comes back to read loads, listen to loads, watch loads. But if there's one line of this whole webinar that's jumped out at you, put that in your own playbook, because actually you are completely different to anybody else on the planet. Your mixture of likes. I love country music. It depresses the hell out of a lot of people. So knowing that's on my playbook, but it's not going to be on anybody else's. So I think it's about that, building your playbook to manage your state effectively. And again, it takes away that overwhelm when we start to do things in little bite-sized chunks.
Brilliant. I'm so conscious of time that I know there's not a few questions we're not going to be able to get through today, but there's just one more that I'd just like to finish with. I'd like to know the difference between masking and telling yourself you're having a good day. Sorry, yeah. What is the difference between masking and telling yourself you have a good day? It would be great to feel more positive in the morning, but as I used to mask all the time, I wouldn't want to go back to that again.
I get that. I think for me, it comes from if you're going forward into the day with authenticity. So if you've set your boundaries, for example, that kind of positive mindset is a habit. I mean, when it's practiced daily, it becomes part of you. Like I said, that neurological kind of 21 to 28 day journey to form a new habit. It's the same with positive thinking. So we've been hardwired for centuries to look for danger, to look for fear. If you're going to start to do that, it will feel like it's not comfortable to start with. For things like, and I know we haven't got time to go into this deeply, but in things like affirmations and mantras and all these kind of things that you can do to start to change the way that you think, your self-narrative, it's to start with, it will always be unnatural. It will always kind of make you feel cringy sometimes, because you don't feel it. But actually, like everything, it becomes something that you exercise. I think the direct answer from me on this point is that the masking part comes from if you're not behaving the way that you would choose to behave. So it's not necessarily about how positive you're trying to be. It's about actually the decisions you're making, the choices you're making, how you're interacting and how you're living your life and how you're working your work.
Thanks.
Yeah. And I would say, you know, if you're feeling like you're struggling, then actually have a buddy or a mentor and tell them I am struggling, but this is the thing that I'm trying. So my backstory, 10 years ago, I had a stroke through stress, lost the use of my arm and my leg, felt really vulnerable. And I told my husband that I was going to get 100% fit and I was going to scuba dive again. That was my kind of intention. And so every day, like Nick said, I would think of, how can I be a better version of myself today than I was yesterday? So that could be that I'll drink more water, or I'll get out for a walk, or I'll, I went to a personal trainer that was an ex-Marine.
Brutal.
Yeah, don't do that. Don't do what I do. That wasn't.
I remember that.
Yeah, I'd come into networking like not being able to move. But you try all these things, but you have a buddy or a mentor that checks in with you. And if you are having a bad day and if life is sucky, then you have to have someone that you can turn to and say, I'm really hurting today. I'm really struggling today. But you can change, quite often you can change your state. So I don't wake up bouncy every Monday morning, but some Monday mornings I do have to play affirmations or listen to good music or really visualize a really good day for myself. So we definitely can train those neural pathways into that more positive state. But yeah, do have someone that you can be real with.
Thank you. Well, it's been an amazing session, and thank you so much. I think the biggest thing that I've learned out of this session is that in terms of, building resilience in teams, it's not about what you can do for other people, it's what you can do for yourself, and it's making those small changes. And actually, we all have that responsibility to build our own resilience before we can sort of like be united as a team and be resilient together. And I think it's really valid that the fact that you can't help everybody, but you can certainly point them in the direction. You can certainly be there and be present. So yeah, thank you ever so much for joining us today. I'd just like to tell you all about a couple of things that are going on. So following on from what we've been talking about in terms of supporting people, there is a mental health first aid course that Western College are offering, which is a 2-day programme. And for anybody that wants to sort of learn how to practice mindfulness and self-control and deal with communication anxiety, there is an online distance learning course available as well. For any organisations that are looking to import well-being into their organisations, then please do feel free to drop us a line at employers@western.ac.uk, and we can talk to you about various support packages that we can work on with you. In terms of other events coming up, so tomorrow we are hosting the Mental Health Workforce Summit, which is all to do with emotional wealth, back to the future. Ultimately, as an outcome from COVID and everybody being absolutely rocked in all these difficult times, this conference will provide sort of further helpful tips and signpost towards implementing a blueprint for your organisation to help repair the mental health damage that's been caused by COVID. We've got a huge lineup of amazing speakers. We've got Dr. Paul Phillips joining us, as well as keynote speakers, Nigel Owens, who MBE, a leading international rugby referee. Also, our wonderful Nick Elston will be also joining us again tomorrow. And we've got lots of other activities going on throughout the conference. So if you'd like to book a place on that for tomorrow, then please do so. I know there's information in the chat. And finally, our next Insights to Industry will be on the 25th of March, and that will be exploring fintech and legal tech. And we're joined by Chris Ball, who's a principal at Edge Consulting, which is a global consultancy to the legal profession, and Stuart Harris, the director of FinTech West. So they'll be talking about the thriving fintech and legal tech industry in the region. Thank you all for joining us today, and a really big thank you to Nicky and Nick for joining us, and a big thanks to the marketing team in the background as well, making this all happen. And we look forward to seeing you soon at the next event. Thanks, everybody. Bye.